Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Please join me in welcoming our television and webcast viewers. My name is Fred Mifflin, President of the Canadian Club of Toronto. Viewers, we're very pleased that you are participating with us today. For 120 years, the Canadian Club has been proud to provide a forum for leaders in every aspect of society to share their ideas with us and to challenge our thinking. We're committed to providing a welcoming venue for discussion and debate on issues that impact our daily lives. Through our programs and activities, we offer access to dynamic public, political, and business figures from around the world, like our guest today, Ed Clark. Before I formally introduce Ed, here's a snapshot of some of our upcoming events. On October 25th, Canadian entrepreneur Zita Cobb will join us to discuss the guiding principles behind the Shorefast Foundation's projects on Fogo Island, Newfoundland, including the award-winning luxury geotourism destination, the Fogo Island Inn. And on November 2nd, join us for breakfast at Facebook headquarters as John Ehrlichman, anchor of BNN and CTV National News, sits down with Jordan Banks, Managing Director of Facebook and Instagram, to talk about how social media and disruptors are changing the way successful businesses go to market. To order your tickets or to learn more about the club, please visit our website at canadianclub.org. You can also join the conversation via Twitter and Instagram by following us at CDNCLUBTO or by using that hashtag. I want to express special thanks to today's event sponsor, McCarthy Tétrault. Thank you for your generous support. And now our guest speaker. Ed Clark, perhaps best known to us in his previous role as President and CEO of TD Bank Group, could be doing a lot of things with his free time today. Instead, since June 2015, he has been providing senior-level strategic advice to Premier Wynne about how to grow Ontario's economy for long-term future success. Given the depth of his experience and business acumen, we're certainly fortunate that he said yes to this very important mandate. Providing advice to the Premier comes naturally to Mr. Clark, who also chairs the Premier's Advisory Council on Government Assets. He also keeps a busy schedule of advisory and community building roles. These include being a member of the Chair's Advisory Council of Habitat for Humanity Toronto, as well as Wood Green Community Services. Mr. Clark also chairs the Advisory Board for the School of Public Policy and Governance at U of T, and he has been a trustee of the U.S.-based Brookings Institute since 2014. In 2010, he was appointed to the Order of Canada for his contributions to Canada's banking and financial industry, as well as for his philanthropic activities. That same year, he was named Canada's Outstanding CEO. Barron's also added his name to its prestigious list for the world's 30 best CEOs in 2012 and 2013. And now we're happy to have him speak to us about securing Ontario's long-term success. He's kindly agreed to take questions following his address, so please fill out the Q&A cards, which are on your table, and one of our volunteers will accept them. Ed, welcome. The Canadian Club of Toronto's podium is yours.
Well, we do the handshake, do we? Thank you. Well, thanks, Fred, for that introduction, and thank you all for being here. I should probably confess a little secret. After we had talked about my coming and speaking, the organizers came back and said, well, Ed, we have a little bit of problem. It turns out that unemployed ex-bankers aren't a big draw these days. And so how about we tell them that you're going to do an imitation of Alec Baldwin doing an imitation of Trump. And so the truth is that would be even more boring than my speech, so I think you've been trumped into getting here. Although it does actually provide, I think, a pointed background to what I'm going to talk about today, which is Ontario's economic prospects. Now, Ontario appears to be doing well. And while its growth is not perfect when you compare it to the rest of Canada or the world, we are actually doing pretty well. Yet the truth is, when you talk to people, many Ontarians feel uneasy about the future. Now, this feeling of unease is not actually unique to Ontario. Indeed, it is felt across the Western world. Well, why? Well, because we actually have three colliding trends in operation. One, secular stagnation caused by a lack of worldwide demand and a slowdown in productivity growth. Two, the threat that the spread of technology will dramatically reduce the need for workers in manufacturing plants, and indeed even of white-collar and service workers as automation increases. And three, the combination of technological change and globalization is making it difficult for real wages to increase for the average worker. At the same time, it's increasing the economic rent that can be extracted by those with scarce capabilities. This, in turn, widens inequality. So we, like most countries in the world, worry that many workers are being left behind. And this worry has been obviously a major factor in world events such as Brexit and, of course, the US presidential election. Many are concerned that the modern economy greatly benefits some, but not others. They wonder, is this the kind of economic growth we really want? Wasn't the economy of yesterday better than the one we're having today? Now, what's ironic is at the same time, policymakers worry that productivity growth is slowing, partly because the dispersion of new technologies has actually slowed down. But if we take measures to speed it up, will we create even greater problems? So what do? Press for more productivity growth or less? I believe that it's a false dichotomy, that society is going to have to choose between future growth and fair growth. You can address both. In fact, you absolutely must address both. Fair income distribution cannot happen without economic growth to support it. But at the same time, economic growth is not sustainable in the long run without the social cohesion and sense of fairness that comes from ensuring that everybody enjoys the benefits of economic growth. Ignoring income inequality leads to instability and protectionist policies which hamper growth. We need to ensure future economic growth reaches everyone. So how to do this? Well, we have to recognize the opportunity and challenges facing both the knowledge economy and, importantly, distinction and its key subset, the innovation economy. So we need to do a few things. First, take advantage of the base we have built in innovation to make Ontario the alternative to Silicon Valley. I will touch on what needs to be done to take that innovation base that we built to the next level a few minutes in my remarks. Secondly, we must also proactively remove the barriers which slow us down in adopting new technologies and create the environment for businesses in the traditional economy to move aggressively to the knowledge economy. Their adoption of new technologies will be essential to our continued economic well-being and our international competitiveness. Now, some of the adjustments will be painful. Let's be frank about that. Automation will lead to the elimination of certain jobs. So that leads me to my third point. We must develop the educational training policies and resources necessary to ensure our citizens can get the new, better paying jobs created in the knowledge economy. And we have to create much better transition programs for those affected by technological change. You know, nothing will raise productivity levels faster, and therefore real incomes faster, than having every firm in Ontario or Canada use the best technology and practices of the leading firms globally in their industry. The recent GM agreement with Unifor is a classic example. We can compete with Mexico in manufacturing as long as it's smart manufacturing where labor costs matter less. Unfortunately, Ontario generally is not the leader in the war of adoption and adaptation. Obviously, in some areas, we are doing very well, but the province has to reinforce its focus to achieve even greater competitive success. Ultimately, the difference maker when it comes to future growth and the creation of well-paid jobs will be this ability to adopt and adapt. There are profound implications if we fail to adopt and adapt technology in terms of competitiveness, economic growth, but equally important, the creation of well-paid working-class jobs. So how can our province be among the best in the world at adopting and adapting new technologies throughout our economy? We must produce the employees of the future for the knowledge economy, for smart manufacturing, and for heavily automated service jobs. Among the biggest constraints when we look around the world for the growth of the knowledge economy is the availability of trained employees and their ability to adapt. Today, thankfully, there is greater interest in teaching coding at early ages. Making kids comfortable with technology will be critical for the future. But many ask, if we lead the world in smart manufacturing and smart service jobs, where will the jobs be and at what wages for those displaced? There is no simple answer to this. It must be a combination of social, educational, training, labor adjustment support, and minimum wage policies. But the answer cannot be to be uncompetitive in the parts of the economy which are open to imports or where we are trying to export. Our traditional firms must be world competitive, or we will have even fewer jobs, and the jobs we have will earn even less. At the same time, we must focus on the enormous opportunity that we have here in Ontario to make the innovation economy a new vector of growth. Frankly, we have to seize it with both hands. This is not a nice to have, this is a must have for Ontario, and it could be our ace in the hand. Now, what precisely governments should do to encourage the innovation economy is not always as obvious as it may seem, because what makes this world, this new world, so exciting is that the future actually isn't known. Change will come from the bottom up, not the top down. Products will be invented that we haven't even thought about. The government must focus on augmenting the supply side, hoping supply, ironically, will create its own demand. Have the best people, and they will find a way to invent new companies and new products. Create the right environment, and companies will come to where the supply of talent is and ideas are located. This doesn't mean there's no role for government, quite the opposite. Having well-run governments able to fund the essential infrastructure of a modern economy is more important than ever. They have to be great at creating cities where people with choice want to work, in creating colleges and universities and medical systems that attract the best and produce the best, ensuring that we supply the right college and university graduates needed in the knowledge economy, investing in the infrastructure to increase the economy's capacity to grow, and supporting the creation of flourishing and innovation hubs and incubators that support high-growth firms. As you all are aware, the Premier is definitely a builder and has focused her government on doing just that, investing in the infrastructure of a modern economy. This is good news. As I got into this role, I've been struck by, frankly, how many pieces have already been put in place by governments over the years, and how many are in progress today. The government is addressing our transportation deficit. We do have great hospitals, colleges, and universities. The governments have invested in world-class research institutes in cancer and brain and regenerative medicine. And truly, we have created an enviable supply of STEM graduates, and as a result, put Ontario on the map for innovation. With these innovation centres in Ottawa, Kitchener-Waterloo, and Greater Toronto, we do really actually have an enormous lead in being the alternative to Silicon Valley. We see this in the action of key players. Google has recently expanded its engineering office in Kitchener-Waterloo and now has over 800 employees in Canada, with the majority in Waterloo and Toronto. GM announced that they are hiring 700 engineers to make Oshawa and Markham a global centre of excellence for self-driving cars. QNX and Shopify in Ottawa are global leaders, one in the automobile software operating systems and the other in e-commerce. And over a week ago, Thomson Reuters announced it will move its CEO and CFO to Toronto and will establish in Toronto one of its key innovation centres. What's common to all these growth stories? The firms come and stay because of the people. No subsidies, no tax breaks were required. And so a message does emerge. In this case, supply really did create demand. Produce the supply of people, and firms will come. Selling this Ontario advantage has become an important feature of the province's competitiveness strategy. Another message is that governments do matter, but in a way I've mentioned before, by doing no harm and supporting core institutions and fundamental research. For GM, this meant a regulatory regime friendly to the testing of self-driven cars. For Google, government mattered in the more traditional sense, doing their job, building a great post-secondary education system with experiential learning, in this case, the University of Waterloo, producing the most sought-after graduates in the world, and supporting, along with private philanthropy, the Institute for Quantum Computing. For Thomson Reuters, it meant working with the government to ensure the education system can grow its supply of graduates in key IT areas, and that immigration policies would not block the rotation of key supervising positions needed to establish the Centre of Excellence. We must have an education strategy which both expands the number of STEM graduates and increases the percent with experiential learning. The success of places like the University of Waterloo has proven the value of this model. Presidents of Canadian universities have endorsed this model. So let's get on with it. We must draw more women in these fields and, more generally, more Canadians. To do that, we have to work at how we interest more young high school Canadians in these courses. Now, they promised me Fred hasn't drunk out of this here. Let me look back at the barriers slowing the growth and driving the innovation economy to where I think we can take it. In the speech I gave last year, I highlighted the need to make Toronto-KW a true corridor. This was going to require dramatically improving the transportation links in the long run and significantly improving them in the short run. This June, Minister Del Duca announced that the government has secured an agreement in principle with CN that will allow GO Regional Express Rail to be built along the Kitchener-GO corridor. And just a few weeks ago, he announced plans to improve bus service along the highway by creating bus bypass shoulders. That's in addition to increasing service during peak times. A series of other future improvements will also decrease travel times along the highway corridor. And we know that the private sector is looking at commuter air service. But when we step back, we say, what is our core challenge to get where we want to get to? We have to figure out how to ensure that our startups, which are plentiful, scale up, that they remain committed to Canada and grow to become great international players. To do that, we're going to have to address some of the core issues. Too often our successes are bought or encouraged to relocate to Silicon Valley, truncating the process of building great Canadian firms. Now, it turns out that this issue for the innovation economy and scaling up, is also true across the traditional economy. Three elements are key to changing the current track in which we in Ontario and frankly in Canada find ourselves. People, markets, and finance. Despite our investments in education, our startups as they grow often still face critical talent shortages. Yes, we have great colleges and universities educating wonderful STEM undergraduates, but half of them are foreigners and most go home. And many of our Canadian students leave because they see the future in bigger firms south of the border. So it turns out in the end that talent still remains often quite scarce. In other cases, people with critical skills or expertise who live outside, but our immigration policies makes it very difficult to bring those people in. We need rules that let companies bring the best and the brightest to Canada and enable foreign students to put their roots here. At the same time, we need policies to encourage global operations to locate here. To do that, we need rules which will allow companies to bring in key executives to create centers of excellence, who in turn will hire many more Canadians. The right immigration policy, by allowing key executives in, can create jobs. It will make Canada a natural place to put innovation centers with worldwide mandates. We have an opportunity here to make immigration a source of competitive advantage to match the great base that we've already built. Now, when I say that, I know there'll be those who worry about flooding Canada with temporary low-cost workers. These are not the workers of which we're talking. We're talking about bringing in workers in several different circumstances, where there actually is a worldwide shortage of people, such as key IT resources, where companies want and are committed to creating centers of global excellence and need key leaders with experience in their firms to set up those operations, or where global companies are well established here and want to rotate workers, sending Canadians out and bringing foreigners in. Sensible and transparent immigration rules can increase Canada's access to global talent while protecting and expanding Canadian jobs. Our immigration system should be a source of economic strength, not a weakness. Let me use Thomson Reuters as an example. They plan initially to have a base of 400 employees over the next 2 years. And this number is going to grow to 1,500 over time. To put this in place, they're going to bring in a small number of executives and supervisors on a short-term basis who know the Thomson Reuters systems or who are expert or have the skills in the advanced work of the Toronto Technology Centre. A small number of temporary workers enables the creation of 400 plus Canadian jobs, growing to 1,500. All here, paying taxes, spending money, creating more jobs. Ontario should do this again and again and again. We are working actively with Ottawa. The Federal Minister of Immigration, John McCallum, is on the case. And it is clear by his speeches that he is determined to make positive changes. I am confident we will have a federal strategy developed in conjunction with the provinces that does that. Cooperative federalism really can work. The second issue in helping more companies to scale up is market access. Small firms can only become bigger firms by winning ever larger contracts. How do we take our small companies and help them export? Well, in Canada, we have lots of export programs at both the federal and provincial level. But in truth, have we cracked the nut at removing the barriers for these small firms? Frankly, the statistics tell us no. We trail behind other countries. We need more targeted efforts. Let's understand the barriers for small companies. Let's find the best support models in the world. Let's focus on the area where Canada has a natural competitive advantage and when the scale-up burden for small firms is the smallest, and give them the support they need to grow. Now, one of the most important domestic markets for scaling up should be procurement opportunities in the public sector. This can be done effectively while respecting our trade obligations. Public procurement rules, however, are inherently and necessarily risk-averse because the government is accountable for taxpayer dollars. But sometimes those requirements that are put in place by governments to protect themselves from risks just make it too costly or complicated for small firms to win contracts. We have to figure out a better balance. Government procurement rules are inherently biased towards big established firms. So what does this mean? It means that Ontario SMEs have to leave the province in order to scale up. Or they are forced to go alone in the export market rather than leveraging a first customer Ontario strategy before going abroad. I've spoken to many leaders in Canadian companies who tell me they have to win their first contracts in the United States before they could possibly win a contract in Canada. We need provincial governments to develop procurement strategies to gain access for small firms. Ontario is starting a program to do this. Established Canadian businesses, such as our banks, TD Bank, should follow suit. They are too conservative in their rules, and they should explicitly give more opportunities to startups. Another way to create the right market for success is to create a regulatory environment that permits testing and piloting new technologies. Remember, as I said, that GM announcement? A deciding factor was Ontario's willingness to become the first province to allow on-road testing of automated vehicles and related technologies. We did what other jurisdictions will eventually do, but we just did it first. Now, the third issue, facing a strategy to dramatically increase our number of scale-ups, is financing. Now, here the real progress made over the last year is a growth of a consensus among financial institutions and others that the problem is real, and the problem is real. You cannot solve a problem which people denied, and the industry has denied this problem for years. So this is good. But now we must do something. And here there is, frankly, no consensus. The UK encouraged large banks to fund a growth fund to finance firms in their growth phase. The federal government is looking closely at this idea. Should we have one big fund? Do all financial institutions have to play, banks, insurance companies, and pension plans? Or should we have sector solutions, or even allow firms to have their own programs? These are the choices. In addition, are there sensible incentives that we could put in place? Frankly, we have a very traditional investor class, encouraged by tax structures to invest in oil and gas, mining, and real estate. So how do you create a new investor class comfortable to invest in the innovation economy? The provinces and the federal government and the financial sector have to come together to find the right answer. What is the wrong answer is to do nothing. I'm confident that we will find a Canadian solution. Finally, two issues need to be raised more broadly for Ontario to compete, win, and grow in the modern economy. First, we have to address the issues around intellectual property. In simple terms, the knowledge economy is about ideas. Sometimes big ideas, but oftentimes much smaller ideas, such as how to do things faster or more effectively. Canada lags other countries in awareness of this issue. And credit goes to Jim Basile for highlighting it. As he points out, once a company gets to a certain size, understanding how to protect and strategically manage IP is the single most important factor for continued success. Now, Canada needs a national intellectual property strategy to spread that understanding. We need an IP policy, including a policy governing our trade negotiations, that protects and supports growing companies as they become international. Canada has too few large companies, and the knowledge economy puts IP as one of the most important building blocks. Second, the innovation sector of the economy also needs core research. The Perimeter Institute is a strong example of how core research activity helps to create leading-edge companies. Across our colleges, universities, and institutes, Ontario scholars are conducting world-leading research in artificial intelligence, clean water, genomics, and other life sciences. Government participation is critical because the capacity for such knowledge generation is frankly just well beyond the financial capacity of private enterprises. So partnerships are essential, and the governments have to be there to help fund. In fact, the really big questions of science and discovery are sometimes becoming too large for even one country to undertake. As a result, international collaborations are becoming the norm, so investing in core research earns Ontario a place in those international scientific collaborations. But here, of course, governments must choose where we should concentrate our dollar. Ontario has chosen advanced health technologies, bioeconomy, clean technologies, digital media, and ICT. Ontario will harness and accelerate its considerable research strengths in cancer, brain, regenerative medicine, and quantum computing by supporting world-class research institutes in these areas. Let me leave you with a few final thoughts. I've touched on some of the contradictions playing out in the economy right now. Some people are nervous about our ability to compete, win, and grow in the knowledge economy. They don't think we're adapting fast enough to it. Others believe the transition is happening all too quickly, and they are rightfully worried that some of the adjustments will be tough. But we can't ignore the inevitable. The technological revolution sweeping the world is not just an opportunity, it's also actually a necessity, an absolute necessity for our growth. So Ontario is going to have to be bold and move aggressively. We have great things going our way. The province is investing in infrastructure and actively supporting key clusters so that Ontario can be truly the alternative to Silicon Valley. And if we address the challenges highlighted today around people, markets, and financing, I am confident that we will secure an incredible new source of growth, not just for us, but more importantly, for our children. But forging a new economy is not enough. We must continue to strengthen our traditional one so that Ontario continues to build the products and delivers the services the world wants at competitive prices. In growing our modern economy, we cannot leave people behind. It's vital that education and social policies are embedded in our economic strategy. When we step back, I think we can feel confident about Ontario's future. We actually do know full well the opportunities and challenges that lie ahead. And I think we are realistic about the advantages we possess, but also the challenges that we're going to face. We, as a group, are quite capable of creating the future we want. But we may do that, we must do it, and continue to have a sense of urgency, which matches the pace at which the world is changing. And we have to combine that with a fierce recognition that it's a much better place if we all get there together. Thank you very much.
Thanks very much, Ed. I have received some questions, but again, to remind people, if they have any questions, to please write them down.
But I'm also happy to leave with no questions.
Okay. You're not going to get away that easily. So the first question is, in addition to the role of government on the supply side of the innovation economy, what role do you think governments should provide on the demand side? Should a portion of government spending be allocated to disruptive technology companies?
Well, I think I'm trying to get that in my procurement strategy. I think essentially I agree with that. I think, we have to figure out everyone has their reasons for not doing it. But I do think the major institutions, government, the big companies of Canada and Ontario have to sit there and say, I'm going to allocate a certain amount of my budget, and I'm going to bet firms knowing that they may fail in providing that product. And we have to have a political system, which unfortunately, right now, every time there's failure punishes, and so you get the behavior that you do is say, well, then I'm going to hire the guy who can't fail. And I think there have to be a tolerance that if it's in this kind of domain, we're going to have some, procurement strategies that don't work. And you shouldn't beat up the agency for doing it. You should celebrate it like they do in Silicon Valley for trying.
Okay. Second question. Given technology has no geographic constraints, how do you propose Ontario holds key talents within its borders in the future?
Well, I don't think you can only do it because you are the place to be. And I think if if we can create a cluster, and I think that's what's so exciting. If I had one learning in the last 2 years, has been because as I throw myself in this, Ontario is envied around the world. The only people who don't know how great Ontario is in this space are Ontarians, which is kind of typical Canadian, right? But everyone in the world recognizes that we're just sitting on an enormous opportunity, and what we have to do is allow these firms to grow and scale up. And when you do that, then in fact, people want to be here. And that's what's the advantage of Silicon Valley, is you want to be there because if you don't go to Google, you go to Facebook, and you move around and you don't care. And what's interesting, when you talk to people like in Google, they say, we don't care if someone leaves. We'll get them back, and we'll get them back with experience in several other firms, and so we'll steal all their capital knowledge when we rehire that people. That's what happens when you build a cluster, and we're on the verge of being able to do that.
Okay, thanks. Electricity prices have been a challenging issue. What is Ontario's plan to address long-run electricity competitewness?
You're right. This is probably way there. That's why I gave Andrew Telezuski this award here. That was amazing. That is, unless you only had his name in the thing, that probably is what went on here. I think it is a challenge. I think, just to make the obvious point, is when you look at gasoline prices and you say, what determines gasoline prices? It's not what the cost of running the gas station is, nor is it the cost of getting the gasoline to the gas station. So gasoline station is a local distributors, getting the gas to that is Hydro One. It is the cost of producing the oil. The oil determines the cost of gasoline. Well, the same is true in electricity. And a decision that, the province made a set of decisions, which I think in today's world would look back and say, dealing with climate change was a critical issue. And so made a set of decisions like taking down coal plants and replacing them with gas plants. That significantly increased the cost of electricity. And that takes the time, but now people are waking up, and my wife says to me, did you see the bill that we just got for electricity? That is rolling through the system and will continue to roll through for the next 4 or 5 years. It is hard to bend that curve. I know, obviously, in the government, not me, but there are lots of people in the government looking and saying, well, is there any way we can bend that curve a little? But the reality is, the production decisions have been made, and now they have to be paid for.
Okay. Canada has many talented immigrants who arrive in Canada with many years of experience in health, business, and engineering. However, upon arrival in Canada, they're unable to find jobs because they lack Canadian experience. They end up working in jobs that don't make use of their skills. What can we do to help move these immigrants more quickly to integrate into the system before we end up losing their talent?
Yeah, I think all of us think that we've got to get better, and I know there are places that do these kind of programs. We've got to get, and I think Ryerson would be one, where we've got to get better at taking people and saying, okay, how do we get you requalified in the Canadian system? And I think generally I would say, I think if we're going to run the immigration policies that we're running, and I'm supportive for that, we have to keep getting better and better at how you take people in and transition them into the modern economy. Because the reality is the number of jobs for people with high school education or less in Canada decline every single year. And so that's not the answer. The answer is to actually figure out how you get people in the jobs require those skills, which they have, but may not be qualified in Canada. They may not have the English skills. And so that's why I go back is when people try to have economic strategies and not sit there and say, what's the accompanying social strategies or educational strategies, they miss what drives the modern economy.
Okay, so I'm not going to get to every question. I have one last question. And this was somebody, obviously a good statistician. Canada was 10th in the Global Innovation Index in 2008. This year we ranked 15th. Others are moving faster. How do we stop the decline? We seem to do better at talking than doing.
Well, I guess, I would say we've done all right. We were in the top 15, so you can look at it that way. But clearly it's the issues that I'm talking about. Is that the world is moving very fast here. And so if we sit around and say, aren't we great? We're missing the point. The world will pass us by even with all this great base. And I think if you said what's our core issue is, we have to get all these little innovation companies and start growing real bigger companies, because it's the bigger companies that create the clusters like Thomson Reuters or et cetera, or Google. And when they do, then you build a whole system around that. And that's why we're falling behind.
Okay, thank you. I'd now like to invite Paul Bonifero, the director of the club, to formally thank Ed.
Thank you, and thank you, Ed. Now you know what the Premier and the Minister feel like in question period. On behalf of the Canadian Club of Toronto, I'd like to thank you for sharing your visionary insights about what our province needs to do to achieve and maintain long-term success. I've had the personal pleasure of working with you and saw firsthand how the province is benefiting from your tremendous wealth of business experience. You are contributing to the advancement of our economic health and well-being in a very strategic way. Your assessment of the potential that lies in the new and traditional economies resonates with us. We should heed your call for bold leadership and aggressive action across all sectors, since we all share the desire to see our province flourish for the long term. Your unwillingness, which I saw firsthand, to accept no or not possible as an answer is inspiring and motivating to us all. On behalf of the Canadian Club, thank you for continuing to share your wisdom and leadership with us. We're deeply appreciative to you, and I might add to your family, for your service to our province and the time you shared with us today. So thank you.
Thanks, Paul. I also want to reinforce our appreciation and thank Ed for joining us today. Also, thanks to McCarthy Tétrault for your support for today's event, and to Air Canada for your support for our season. This concludes our program today, which will be broadcast on Rogers TV in the days to come. We're grateful to Rogers TV and 680 News for their continuing promotion of Canadian Club events. I also want to thank MediaEvents.ca, Canada's online event space, and VVC for live streaming today's event. To learn more about the club, please visit us at canadianclub.org. Thanks again for joining us. We look forward to seeing you at another of our events in the near future. Have a wonderful afternoon.